Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bikinis After Babies. Thank you so much for joining us today. As always, I am one of your hosts, Mandy Rochon, here with your other IFBB Bikini Pro, Jillian Hughes.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. Today is actually part 2 of our interview with Simone Maman from Balance and Body Diagnostics. She is a wife, a mom of 5, a functional health practitioner, holistic and sports nutritionist, and eating psychology coach. And we brought Simone on to talk all things hormones, all things women's health. Last week, we dove deep into contest prep and how that can affect the homeostasis of the body, things for athletes to look into, lab testing that you should consider, just in a way to be able to thrive as a female athlete. So please go and check that episode out. And then you'll listen today to part 2, where we dive deep into the topic of perimenopause. Hot topic on everyone's minds. And I don't know if it's just me, because I'm 45 and the content I consume is in this theme, but perimenopause. It's something that we're all talking about. I think some people are like, what is this? Or things are happening earlier than they expected. They sort of expected a lot of these things to happen later in life, and sort of going, holy moly, like, where has this information been? So I'd like to pivot a little bit and talk about perimenopause. Okay. What it is, how to thrive, all those things. Because what we commonly hear here at our business, Momshell Method Fitness, is, it's just like all of a sudden, just seems like the things I used to do don't work anymore. I'm just exhausted all the time. I, gain 5 pounds, and then I do everything I can and I gain 2 more. So tell me, how do we explain what is going on at this change of life? What to expect? When does it happen? All the things.
Okay, so I know everybody listening is going to think that I am nuts, because I'm going to tell you, I think this is the best time ever. I think perimenopause. I think perimenopause. Mandy, how old are you?
Okay, I knew that was coming. I was like, I'm 35. I'm 35.
Okay, this is her little baby face right there. I'm like, how old is this? Okay, so you know what? This might actually be relevant to you, because there are women who, in their mid-30s, do begin experiencing symptoms of perimenopause.
That was me.
Right?
Well,
we oftentimes go ahead.
Oh no, I was saying I'm probably part of the group that Jillian said, like, so what exactly is it? Because, like, I think I first started hearing about it, of course, like, kind of in our business, everything, and I've done some self-research, and of course, like, Jillian has really been like, hey, like, this is me, like, this is what's going on, and, like, done a deep dive. So I'm excited to hear this, since, like, obviously this is going to be me soon.
Okay, so we're going to look at perimenopause a couple of ways. One, it's amazing. It is actually, irrespective of what you might be feeling in the moment, because that can change. We're going to talk about how to change that. Perimenopause is an amazing time in life. We generally speak about perimenopause as this, like, biochemical thing, right? So totally separate from a woman's experience. It's this phase of transition towards menopause. So what is menopause? It's basically 12 menstrual cycles missed consecutively. So you don't get your period for a whole year, you're in menopause, okay? And then everything after that day is postmenopausal. If you don't get your period for 6 months and then you get it again, you set the clock back to 0 and you have to count another 12, right? And so the period of perimenopause is literally just the lead up to that. Can begin in your mid-30s, and it can last anywhere for like 4 to 10 years is what the literature says. And every woman will express to you, a different time frame. Essentially what's happening is the ovaries are just like starting to close up shop, right? So they're not producing and secreting hormones in the same quantity, the same frequency, and the same schedule as they used to. And so by hormones, I'm speaking specifically about estrogen and progesterone. And so progesterone is typically the first to go. And if you don't know, if anyone's listening doesn't know the relationship between progesterone and estrogen, they are great friends, but one is kind of like the big sister to the other. And I would say progesterone is that big sister that's like, estrogen, you can do your thing, but if you get out of hand, like, I'm coming for you. Okay. So she is the counterpoint to, she just kind of like micromanages estrogen's behavior. So one is like the responsible sister and one is like a little bit crazy. Can be, right? The thing is, progesterone is typically the first one to go, and progesterone can help us feel calm, at ease, like everything is good. And so when it starts to dip, we can start getting all of those symptoms that are not obviously related to hormones, but they are, and they're cognitive. So poor sleep, can't get to sleep, can't stay asleep. You are feeling just more stress and not really sure why. Anxiety, insecurity, brain fog, all that sort of stuff can absolutely be related to those declining levels of progesterone. Declining levels, and I'll say fluctuating levels of estrogen, since progesterone is depleting, estrogen's having her own little party, right? That can come with a whole slew of symptoms too. And so that, in a nutshell, is perimenopause, just that roller coaster ride. Some people describe it as a second puberty that can happen sort of mid-30s through your 40s into your early 50s, where you're just down-regulating your hormonal output towards menopause. Now, there is another side of it, and it's seldom spoken about, but this is why I'm saying that I think perimenopause is amazing. We have a lot of different hats that we wear in life. And some of them, we put on our own heads, and some of them society puts on our heads. And I think the ones that we all sort of collectively wear at very specific times in life would be the archetypes or the hats of, like, the princess, right? When it's all about me, and, you want everybody to notice you and look at you, and it's all about, showing up as your glossiest best self because you're working towards courtship, right? And so that's when we are seemingly super confident, but maybe at our most insecure. We don't really know ourselves yet. We're trying to fit in. And then you go into the mother, right? Where it's all about giving, right? So you're not trying to receive anymore. You're just trying to give, trying to nurture, you're trying to nourish, and all of your energy is being turned out towards others. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Perimenopause, energetically, is that period where a woman is being asked to actually turn her energy back inward and actually move away from mother towards, like, wise woman, towards queen. And I love that, because it's something that we sort of stop doing. Some of us stop doing for a really long time when we're trying to be something for everyone. You're being asked to relinquish certain belief systems about who you are and who you need to be. You're being asked to reconsider your habits and how you show up. And I will tell you that the only way that you can ever really reconcile stepping into this new role is if you understand that you are whole and purposeful in that new role without any of the stuff that was. Where this can be a real problem today more than ever is for women who have had their kids later in life. So I have 5, but throughout all of that, I had a lot of miscarriages, 8 in total. And so my oldest, she's 21 now, I had her when I was 24 years old, so relatively young. And my last one, I had her when I was 40. If we were to do things conventionally, and I were to have all of my kids when it was societally, we'll say back then, ideal, right? Hormonally ideal, I would have had them all in my probably late teens to early 20s, right? That's the way that it used to be done. And if you think about when perimenopause happens hormonally and again energetically, it's a wonderful time, because at that point your children have grown, they've matured, they're probably out of the house, and you now have time and space to turn back in, right? The energy is available to actually pour back into you and reestablish yourself as this, like, new woman in your queendom. I have a 5-year-old at home and I'm almost 46 years old. My perimenopause is happening with a crazy person running around my house. Right? And that's hard, because while I know that energetically it's my time to really be okay turning in and taking care of myself and actually being okay receiving again and moving a little bit slower, I can't entirely do that because the momentum of my life is that I am still deep in mother archetype. And so, it's an amazing thing that a lot of us are having kids later, because some of us want to build careers and so we're delaying it. Some of us, we're having our kids later because there are fertility issues, and thank goodness for modern medicine, right? So we don't hate modern medicine, but thank goodness for conventional modern medicine that's allowing us to have children later in life, because maybe that's the only time that we can. And so I love this time of life because I think it's an amazing opportunity to really deepen your relationship with yourself. even though there's all of these symptoms, and we'll talk about, how to manage those and improve upon them. But I also recognize how in this day and age, particularly, our demographic is experiencing perimenopause in a brand new way, because we're living two timelines at the exact same time. So the focus on our stress management and our timetables is going to be so paramount if we're going to navigate perimenopause with any grace at all.
I love the positivity with it so much. I feel like you explained it so beautifully. I feel like I went through perimenopause when I was 32. No.
Possible. Entirely possible.
I'm just saying, realizing yourself as a whole and like what's important to you and looking inward. Like, I feel like I went through that and I'm like,
Well, I love that for you.
And I think you're the perfect person to talk about this, because you you have the experience of having children in your 20s, and then also being in your 40s and in this phase with a 5-year-old. So can you explain to our audience why it is that the perception exists, and maybe this is some people's reality, but that fat loss seems impossible in perimenopause? Or do things just shift and we need to do things differently? Kind of break that down for our listeners.
Sure. So perimenopause can feel impossible when you're also trying to go after fat loss, and fat loss can feel impossible when you're going through perimenopause. That's not untrue. And we tend to get really like marginalized, like very one end of the spectrum or the other views on this. So, there's like the coaches who are like, nope, it's easy, it's all your fault, you're just moving less and you're eating too much, right? More disposable income and too much sort of like time to just sort of sit and relax. And then you have the other end of the spectrum that's like, no, it's entirely your hormones. And it's a little bit of everything, right? It is a little bit of everything. The reality is that when we were younger, it was easier to be consistent with movement. Maybe we didn't have a car and we had to walk all over campus, or we were out like riding bikes with our friends. Let's be real, we don't do that. We leave this box that we're in right now and we get into the one on wheels, and you drive to the other box and you go sit there. So are we moving a little bit less later in life? Yeah, probably. But there is more to it than that. There is the hormonal component, and it is very, very real. So again, we can look at cortisol, insulin. We talked about that tier 1, but down a little bit lower, so under like pregnenolone and DHEA, we actually get to the sex hormones and the metabolic hormones that are on the tip of everybody's tongues right now. So testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and then of course your thyroid hormones and melatonin, which we'll talk about when we get to sleep and brain detoxification. But let's start with progesterone. When progesterone starts to decline, huge impact on the gut microbiome, gut permeability. And we talked about this, but when the gut becomes permeable, which we do unfortunately experience in perimenopause, if we don't know better and do something about it, unfortunately, all of these different things start to proliferate in the gut. And what that does is it causes for the liver to take on an additional burden for detoxification, processing, conjugation that it didn't have before when the gut was sealed and keeping things where they needed to be. The liver in particular is massively responsible for converting thyroid hormone, so T4 to T3 in its active form, right? So generally, if you ask people like, where's your metabolism? They're like, in my thyroid, right? And that's partly true. It's largely true. And so when progesterone is declining, estrogen is declining, and you've got, and even, when it's fluctuating, and sometimes we've got like a little bit of estrogen dominance, it is affecting your gut, that is putting too much burden on the liver, and the liver unfortunately is not going to be prioritizing things, nor will it have the ability to actually go through those regular T4 to T3 conversions, and that is going to downregulate thyroid production and output. And so when it comes to fat loss, that can be a little bit harder. Next thing, with the thyroid specifically, covered in hormone receptors and estrogen receptors. Estrogen is actually super important for the thyroid. Just like cortisol gets a bad rap, so does estrogen. I don't know, it's like people think like, oh my God, estrogen, like that's going to make you watery. No, like every single hormone in the body has a purpose, and estrogen definitely needs to be there, and it is part of thyroid function. So as estrogen starts to dip, which is what happens during perimenopause, unfortunately, thyroid function does go with it. So fat loss can be a struggle for sure. When all of these things are happening in the body, it is a stress state. cortisol is going to increase until it flatlines, and insulin is going to become dysregulated. Fat depositions are going to happen. So there is a ton that we can do, but just know that this is normal, this is common, this is exactly the way the system is supposed to work if you don't intervene. As far as putting on muscle, the same is true. And so, I mean, even men deal with this too, right? As we begin to age, we actually start to lose muscle. So it's not even just a matter of putting it on, it's catching up, right? And working against a system that is actually atrophying muscle that we already have. So I don't think that it's impossible. In fact, I think it's very possible to get to a place where you're feeling really great in perimenopause and beyond, and where, yes, you're able to positively change your body composition, meaning, achieve healthy levels of body fat and put on, protective muscle, because that's really what it is. It's such an incredible marker for good health. So it can feel one way, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
So would you say then that the approach should be different in light of the fact that everything is just shifting and changing? Like, are there some things that we want to stay away from? Because, you'll sort of see this list of like, well, when you are in perimenopause, like, these are all the things you should no longer do. And then these are all the things that you should be doing. So what do you think about that? And do you have some tips for success?
Yeah, I do. And it might not be what, we're all used to hearing, like, resistance training, absolutely. So, wear the weighted vest, right? Because bone health matters and muscle matters, and definitely lift progressively heavier. So increase, whether it's, your load, or whether it's the number of reps or sets, whatever that's going to look like. We know all of that stuff already. We absolutely know that we need to prioritize protein, but we also need to prioritize fats, because our hormones are actually manufactured from converted cholesterol. So low cholesterol or low fat diets often mean not enough ingredients to actually make the hormones that we're trying to recover and sort of keep online. Carbohydrates are actually very, very important for T4 to T3 conversion as well. A lot of people don't talk about that. And, we've come almost out of, I think, a time and space where carbs were vilified. So fibers, carbohydrates, hugely important. Also massively important for your digestion. And digestion is so key when it comes to hormone regulation. If our digestion is not working adequately, if you're not having bowel movements daily, and very complete bowel movements daily, even multiple times a day, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to actually clear out things like exogenous hormones that have been bound and are ready to be expelled from the body. They end up being unbound in a congested digestive system and recirculated into your liver and the rest of your system, where you can get higher levels of estrogen dominance perhaps, especially as progesterone is on the decline. So the dietary stuff, I think we mostly know. I think one of the things that is missing the most, though, is actually community. And I say that because a lot of this, we're saying like, okay, well, we don't know a lot about progesterone, right? Like, I just heard about it when, my clients were talking about it, or, I saw someone talking about it on social media. And, I remember when I first started addressing like the recurrent miscarriages that I was having, and I thought that I was the only one in the world who was experiencing it. And I felt so ashamed, and I felt so in the dark about what was going on. And, you go and you see your doctor, and then they send you to the specialist, and you just kind of get funneled through this, what feels like a dark underground tunnel. So you're going where you're supposed to go, right, to get the help you need, but nobody else is there. Like, it's kind of like this, like, come with me, let's go. And I remember when I got to this fertility clinic that, I worked with here in Toronto, this beautiful building up at the top floor, the elevators open to this huge, huge main room. And it was littered with women, like all the women. There were so many people there. And there were women there that I knew. And that's what I was like really struck by. I'm like, wait a minute, you're going through this and you're going through this? None of us were talking about it. None of us were talking about it. And so we were unfortunately not making the headway that we could have, because we weren't sharing information. We had a massive stress load that was actually dysregulating our hormones that we needed to get back online to be able to carry our babies to term or even get pregnant. We needed to feel supported. we just needed to be in community with each other. But up until that moment, I had no idea that anybody else was experiencing this. And the same is true for women and men who are dealing with hormonal dysregulation and difficulty losing body fat, putting on muscle during this time. We're not talking enough about it because sometimes it can feel a little bit stigmatizing. It's like, it's a bit embarrassing. Like, why can't I do this when it seems like everybody else can? Yeah. But when we actually plug into community, and so, I know you guys have like a number of pages and you guys are out at shows. Like, I would urge even your lifestyle clients who aren't competitors, like, go to the shows, meet these women, get into these groups, like, comment on these podcasts, go, onto Mandy and Jillian's Instagram pages. And when they post something that you love, like, engage with it. You'd be, I think, pleasantly surprised to see how much value and healing it can give you to actually meet like-minded people and experiencing people. So other people who are going through the same thing, what it will do for your mental health and for your stress chemistry is remarkable. And that is actually, like I said, that's your tier one. That is actually going to directly impact the way all of the other chemistry in your body works. So often overlooked, but I honestly, if I could give everybody just the one tip, if you want a little bit of support through this, it's plug into community. Ask questions, tell your story. It's not yours alone, I promise you that.
It's so true. And I think there's just so many people that are not there yet, or in maybe denial, and just sort of, it's easier to like pretend it's not happening and I'll just try something else, and I'm just tired, I'll just, try this supplement or this, like, just sort of, I guess, just not wanting to admit that these things are happening, that they are, and they are very normal. Or maybe you've caught wind of someone crazy on social media that's always talking about her hormones, and you're like, I don't want to be like that lady, But I think also, like, again, this is how you learn about what you're experiencing is very normal, and then also like ideas and how people got help and how people started to feel better. So I think that's very positive and encouraging too, to also see women that are like, well, look at me doing all the things despite all the changes that we're going through. 100%.
And we have great resources. Like, if you don't yet feel comfortable sharing your story and asking questions, because another thing that we all seem to do is, like, when a symptom comes up, instead of trying to understand why it's happening, we look to justify why it's happening, right? So it's like, okay, well, my libido's low, and so all of a sudden you look at your partner and it's like, well, he's doing this, or she's doing that, and it's like, well, that's why I'm feeling this way. Well, no, it actually could be chemical. That's a real thing, right? Or it's like, oh God, like, I'm exhausted, I slept so many hours, and then you look at your kids and you're like, well, the house is always a mess, and so, like, who wouldn't be exhausted when you look at those things? And yes, but, like, is your response, and I think this is a fair question to ask, is your response proportionate to the perceived stressors, right? So if you're not ready, though, to have these conversations openly, even with your partner, by the way, because they do need to know what's going on so that they could better respond to, the ebbs and flows of maybe your mood or whatever it is, you can even look to books. Like, libraries still exist, right? You can get books on Amazon. That's still a thing. All of your content doesn't have to come from social media. So yesterday online, I shared a book by Esther Blum, she's an integrative dietitian. It's called See You Later, Ovulator. I love that book. It's really easy to understand. It's cute, right? And like, literally anything you ever wanted to know about perimenopause and menopause. So food, movement, HRT, it's all in there, and it's like really, really easy to thumb through the way that she structured it. There's another book that, if you are curious about why the world is so afraid of HRT and what the real science actually states on the relationship between estrogen, progesterone versus progestin, which is a synthetic form of progesterone the body does not do very well with, its relationships to things like cancer, bone health, brain health, cardiovascular health. An amazing book. It's a little bit longer, but again, like, you can just kind of pull out sections and you'll always get value. Is called Estrogen Matters. Estrogen Matters. It is on Amazon, local bookstores. Are there local bookstores? Yeah, we have local bookstores though. I order everything online. But I would say that those two are actually, like, phenomenal resources. So yeah, just learn, whether it is, like I said, through, a space like this one, talk to your girlfriends, get some books, but learn, educate yourself so that you can better understand what your body's actually going through and what you can do about it.
Yeah. I can tell you, like, I've shared all, like, we're really good about sharing, like, are the happy stuff, right? Like the preps, the show selfies, all of that stuff. And on my fertility journey, having to share that, having to, like, really be open about that is like, I don't think it was hard for me to make that decision anymore, because I saw, like, all the good community can come from. And I know we preach this to our clients quite a bit, but if there's, like, a workshop, if there's a get together, if there's a meet, like, try to go to it, because, like, even you're going to be around, like, relatively like-minded people or similar people, and you're going to learn and meet people. So, like, when I started knowing, like, hey, I'm going to share my fertility journey, even if I have to go through IVF and, like, record, you know, the needle injections and everything, like, it's like, I'm going to do it. And ever since I started doing it, I have so many messages of all of these great stories, or women that are like, I'm going through this too, for, like, whatever separate reason. But it's so helpful. It's hard, but it's helpful. And I think sometimes people are scared about being negative online, like, just, oh, woe is me kind of thing. But it's like, no, like, you can communicate, and it's okay. Like, life's not perfect. Like, life's messy. And like, you know, if we're going to share all the good, like, we're not perfect people. Like, here's some of, like, this is what's really happening too. So I think that's, like, a really good thing to take away from, like, what you've been saying about, like, building community. It's so important, like, in everything. You're just not alone.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you touched on something a little bit ago, and I wanted to circle back around to it.
Sure.
HRT. So it's a hot topic. It's something that, you know, some people are very afraid of, some people are very opinionated about. Some people will never ever need it. Some people, it's an absolute yes. So break that down. Like, is HRT for everybody?
Maybe it can be. Obviously, there could be certain conditions, certain metabolic conditions or otherwise, that could make you a less ideal candidate for certain types of HRT than others, and that's a conversation to have with your practitioner. Like, I definitely do not want to speak to anybody's individual needs, because I'm not caring for them. I don't know their whole story, and it definitely takes more than a 15-minute visit, right? But with that being said, there is a huge bias against HRT that exists in the global medical community, largely due to a study that was conducted many years ago. And so the NIH ran a study, and they were actually looking at the impact of HRT on bone health, cardiovascular health. And as a byproduct of that study, they were able to also follow women long term to see, just in general, how they did when they were on HRT. Now, the study was very abruptly stopped with the announcement that there were concerns that HRT was actually increasing the instances of cancer in the women that were the subjects of this study. It took about 8 days for the full study findings to come out before, like, newspapers, news stations were reporting on this. And what happened almost instantly is that the prescriptions of HRT dropped by about 70%, and they still remain unnecessarily low today. That's a personal and a professional opinion. 8 days later, the actual, like, the full study comes out, and unfortunately a lot of doctors weren't able to look at it without bias. But if they were able to look at it without bias, which some did, and so that book that I recommended, Estrogen Matters, the doctor who wrote that book dissects that study very, very well, and actually gives the true science of what the findings indicate. And there is no actual significant data to point to HRT, and I'm going to say estrogen and progesterone, so bioidentical micronized dosages of the two, meaning natural, so not a synthetic form like progestin, which is what was actually used in the study. There is no significant data to point to an increase of likelihood of developing cancers when you are on those therapies. Now, when we look at HRT, obviously we're looking at, well, what about, like, my libido, or what about, like, weight loss, things like that. There are other things to consider, though, other motivators that could cause a woman to, at the very minimum, have the conversation about hormone replacement therapy. And so, like I said, I want you to think about like 3 Bs, right? So brain health, cognitive function. Cognitive function is negatively impacted by the decline of our hormones. And so repleting those hormones, it's not replacing, right? It's repleting, it's bringing back what was, improves our cognitive function. There's also your beating heart. That's why I call it the 3 Bs, right? So brain, beating heart, and bone health. Cardiovascular health is improved when those hormones are repleted. Before perimenopause and menopause, women have an edge over men because of our hormonal profile when it comes to bone health and cardiovascular health. After menopause, we no longer do. And we actually suffer from deteriorating bone conditions and cardiovascular conditions as a larger, portion of the population than men do. And it is due to the fact that we have this second puberty where our hormones start to dysregulate and decline. So HRT can be very, very beneficial when it comes to all of those things. The other thing that it can be very beneficial to is, again, dealing with those tier 1 hormones like cortisol and insulin, which is going to have everything to do with our gut health and our hormone health, and generally how we actually navigate life, like where's our emotional health. But there's another thing that, not everybody wants to talk about publicly, and I fully understand if you don't want to go online and talk about it, but I do, and it's actually our sexual health.
Yeah.
And so not just where are our hormones and how frequent or heavy or light is our cycle, because there will be a point where you don't have it anymore, but there are things like clitoral and vaginal atrophy. So the thinning of those tissues, which can make sex very painful, that area very, very dry, and that can definitely impede the intimacy of your relationship. And I think that's a really important thing to consider. Just because you don't have a menstrual cycle anymore and you're no longer able to conceive and carry a baby to term doesn't mean that you can't still have a thriving, intimate relationship with whoever your partner is, or even yourself, right? That's still something that you can look forward to. And so HRT can actually address all of those issues. Where I think we run into problems is when we continue to work with practitioners who are not hormone literate and hormone replacement therapy literate. If you have a practitioner who is really tethered to old, antiquated data and misrepresented data from maybe that particular study, then you need to find yourself a new practitioner. There are practitioners who, although the FDA has approved the use of bioidentical progesterone and estrogen through transdermal, so patches, lubricants, troches, which are just like lozenges that you dissolve in the mouth. Unfortunately, not testosterone, so that it can be prescribed off-label, or what some women do is they actually go to sort of like male hormone clinics and they just get something like 1/10 of the dose. That is actually possible. But there are doctors who just don't want to have that conversation, so they will prescribe, let's say, birth control to a woman in perimenopause when birth control is not going to do anything for her mental health, her bone health, her cardiovascular health, her sexual function. It's actually going to, give her more insomnia, it can give her more anxiety, it can give her more depressive thoughts. So it's really not addressing the issue. And the fact is that most birth controls do actually contain synthetic versions of hormones and not the bioidenticals that are, plant-based and that our bodies know exactly what to do with. A lot of the clinics, the hormone clinics, so kind of like the beauty clinics that are prescribing a lot of peptides and things of the sort, have also gotten into prescribing hormone replacement therapy, but through pellets, which I don't love. And they're like, oh, well, they're slow release. I have not seen them to be slow release. That's not what the markers are showing me when we test clients. What we do see is that they get these exceedingly high concentrations in serum of hormone, which can make you feel immediately amazing, right? A bit of a superhero, or not, depends on how you respond to it. But then what happens is that they are not slow release, but slow depleting. And so you can almost feel like you're being weaned off of something. You can start to feel withdrawal symptoms. There's also obviously great risk with having these super high concentrations of a hormone in your body, if it's like testosterone, for instance, because again, pathways, conversions, it can all be really quite dangerous. So I would say, number one, at the very minimum, have the conversation with somebody who is hormone literate, because it is likely that if you have been educated by Gen Pop and even potentially by your own physician, that you're actually being miseducated and missing the truth that can be so helpful, so healing, and can really actually make perimenopause, like I said, pretty great. The other thing is you want to make sure that whoever is prescribing and dispensing for you actually knows what they're doing, and that you're running the type of lab work that is going to, imply what it is that you actually need, rather than, like I said, just going getting some pellets, implanted and hoping for the best. So test, have someone prescribe accordingly, retest frequently, keep those open lines of communication open with your practitioner, for sure.
I love it. I think that's great advice. And we'll link those two books below so that you can find them. I know they're both going in my cart as we wrap up this episode. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that was like jam-packed. Is there anything that we didn't cover in regards to what you see at Balance and Body Diagnostics? And maybe you can share with our audience a little bit about what that looks like if they were to become one of your clients, and what your service provides.
Sure, I appreciate that. Generally speaking, we actually see a lot of the same across the board with our athletes. And that's not to say that our protocols that we would suggest to our clients are ever the same, because they're all so biospecific. But the point is that, we all go through very similar preps. The elements seem to be the same, and our bodies do tend to respond the same way, meaning gut dysbiosis, hormonal imbalances, and just generally a lot of suffering that doesn't need to happen. If you were to work with Balance and Body Diagnostics, let me first clarify that we don't take the place of your prep coach. So we're sort of like that extra tool in the toolbox, and we work with you alongside your prep coach. So you can almost think of us as like prep doulas, where we'll advocate for you, right? We love to be in conversation with your coach, and some of them, they're all into functional health. Some of them actually don't know, and that's okay. That's not their trade. That's not their wheelhouse. And so we're here to teach them about, what they can do in your next prep or in your recovery season to get you on stage better than ever. We do start with a pretty comprehensive, it's a really long intake, sorry, but totally worth it. The reality is that, it's probably going to be the first time that you really take a look at your entire medical history and your whole health story to this degree. Everything matters. The things that you would have gone through as a kid, antibiotics you've been on, surgeries that you had 20 years ago, it all is part of what it feels like to live in your body today. So we do a pretty comprehensive health intake, and we have a massive menu of labs that you can choose from. And of course, we will recommend which ones we think are appropriate and which ones are going to help us truly understand why you're feeling the way that you are, why your body is responding to prep or just to life the way that it is. Those labs get dispatched to you, and aside from blood work, which you would have to take at a lab with a phlebotomist, and we would help you find one in your area, all of the other labs actually come direct to your home with instructions on how to conduct them. They're very simple. Some of them are stool samples, some of them are saliva tests, some of them are blood with a pinprick. They're really easy to take, and we always guide our clients through them. So generally we get on like one-to-one calls and walk them through the whole process. No, we don't go into the bathroom with you when you're taking your stool sample. That you can do on your own. But we're really good at telling you how to do it.
Yeah.
Once we get all of that information back, all of that data correlated to everything that you've told us about your experience, all of that gets interpreted into not what is a diagnosis, but just some areas where we see that optimization can happen. Now, obviously, if there are gut infections, if there's parasites, H. pylori, candida, SIBO, those are things that we can recommend really powerful protocols for. We don't prescribe antibiotics. We don't prescribe at all. We'll always also provide you with a referral to your primary care physician so that they can oversee and so that you can have options. You might want to go the antibiotic route. You might want to take a different route altogether. We tend to work with lifestyle, so diet, rest optimization, exercise, so movement, whether that be cardio, whether that be weightlifting, whether that be more or less, stress reduction protocols, and then lots of herbals and things of the sort. So, like I said, if you've got an infection, definitely working to eliminate biofilms and to help actually eradicate infections so that you can actually heal your gut, get your hormones back online, get back on stage. We work with our clients very, very closely, generally speaking, from about 4 to 6 months. So, you're not going to see results overnight. This is about lifestyle change before it is about supplementation, very strategic supplementation, or eradication protocols. But we hold your hand throughout the entire process, and would be so happy to become a part of your team, whoever your coach is. If you're tuning in here, your coaches should be right here on screen because they're amazing. And then if you are actually needing or wanting something like HRT, then again, we will absolutely help you find not just a practitioner who can prescribe for you. We'll communicate with them so that they understand what your labs are revealing your needs are. And then in addition to that, help you find a compounding pharmacy. I just had a reel that I popped up, and it was specifically about Prometrium, which is a bioidentical micronized progesterone. It generally is formulated, it's compounded in a peanut oil, but if you are anaphylactic to peanuts, that's definitely not for you. Talk about increasing, stress response. You can, have it custom compounded for you at one of these pharmacies that we could help you connect with into something like an olive oil. So there's so many options, and we're really just there. Like I said, we're kind of like the doulas of functional bodybuilding, and we're just going to help connect you to all the right people, but more specifically to all the right information so that the choices that you make moving forward are right for you.
Awesome. I love that. I think that's so great. And
there's one other thing though. There's one other thing. Sorry to cut you off, but for any of your clients who are coming through, whether it be the snips from this podcast or otherwise, we will be offering a pretty significant discount to those clients. It just gives us more of an opportunity to continue working with Mandy and Jillian, which looks like a lot of fun. So definitely if it's something that you're interested in, there's no obligation to just, you just get on a call and we can talk about what that looks like. But for sure, your plan as far as financing it will be cut down to size.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, that's so great. And we'll leave all that information below so that anyone can reach out to you. I've already just binged all of your content because it's so great, like all of your reels, and I've learned so much just in the short time that I've gotten to know you. So I can't tell you enough how grateful I am that you came on here today. So can you share with our audience how they can find you?
Of course. So our website is www.balanceandbodydiagnostics.ca. My personal website is www.18diagnostics.ca. And then the same handles on Instagram. You'll be able to find Angelica as well. So she is my partner in crime over at Balance and Body. And we typically tag her personal page as well. So if you just kind of vibe with her more and you're not in bodybuilding, but you're more of a lifestyle client, then you'll probably want to deal with one of us individually. So yeah, that's where you can find us. That's where we are.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And like Jillian said, we'll have all of the information linked below, all of the places they can go to contact you and anybody listening. Just all of this information that Simone has shared is absolutely so important, whether you're on a prep journey or a lifestyle client. It is just absolutely important to get your labs checked, to be able to communicate with someone, to know you're not feeling alone, all of these things, and to listen to your body. So thank you so much for joining us again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you both so much for having me in your space.
Yes.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.